The world in chaos. England, France, Tanzania in the midst of political uprisings, but they're not the only ones. In fact, there's about 20 other countries that are also in the midst of extreme political uprisings. And the media is just not reporting on this. And we already saw how long it took for the media to bring up the Nigerians being mass murdered, the Christian Nigerians being mass murdered, which we spoke about a couple times in the last year, but it took Trump to actually say something and a ton of celebrities to bring it up before it took the mainstream media. And here we have political uprisings that are happening across the globe, and the mainstream media is not picking it up. And I think they're not picking it up because many of the issues that all of these countries are facing are issues that the United States are currently facing. And if the American public knew what happened as a result of immigration and the Green New Deal stuff and the culture wars and what was taking place in these other countries, as well as the budget crises that were taking place in, France and things like that, they would look at it and go, "Oh crap, we need to get our stuff together. We're going to have some massive issues." And Aaron, you've got these stories. Why don't you go ahead and you know pick our first poison?
Yeah, well, the global order is self-destructing before our very eyes, and the United States is isolated from the international news cycle. We don't look outside of our window and see what's actually happening. And if you were to take a peek, it's wild. Let's start with France. So, France has French farmers protesting against the European Union Green Deal, the regulations, the unfair competition from imports, and plummeting income. So, what's happening right now around Paris, Lyon, and forgive me for my French forgive me for my French,
You're
Mar
cursing.
Marseille, they're blocking major highways. They're blocking major routes to major centers. Tractors apparently have blockades set up over 100 major roadways. They're dumping manure, agricultural waste in front of government buildings. They're blocking access to fuel depots and distribution centers. So, specifically, their grievances, the French grievances, are that the EU environmental regulations are making French farms uncompetitive. National governments, and I imagine the French government, is doing what's in the best interest of the elites, the global order, and the everyday French farmer, like the American rancher. We had Mike Calicrate on recently, and he talked about the cartel, the beef oligopoly. The same problem is happening in France. We have an out of control government that's choosing to grow their global agendas rather than taking care of their national agenda. And you have these farmers that are saying enough is enough. Cheap Ukrainian agricultural imports are flooding the market. We probably because of inflation, rising fuel and fertilizer costs are corresponding with price increases for produce. So French consumers can't afford groceries like American consumers can't. Their farmers aren't making any money like our ranchers and farmers. Isn't this crazy, Jason, that we're having this conversation? We
Well,
just had Mike on.
and so the farmers, that protest has been going on for a long time. Right now, what we're seeing as well that just started up was this mass anti-austerity strikes. And the austerity movement is this idea. It's an economic policy of dealing with budget issues in the country by increasing taxes and reducing government budget deficits through cutting spending, or a combination of both. So a little bit different than like Reagan economics, because they're talking about tax increases. So this tax increases as well as the spending cuts. And so we're seeing a ton of teachers, a ton of healthcare workers, schools, uh, all of these different markets are uprising against the austerity movement of the French government. Now, what's really interesting is in the 1850s, Francois Bastiat wrote a book called The Law, and it was in opposition. This was after the Revolution, the French Revolution, and in kind of the second reign of this post-revolution France. And a couple huge things came out of Francois Bastier's book, The Law. And this is a short book. You can find it. It's not very long. You can probably find it for free on the internet. But a couple things came out. And the big idea was the first big idea was centered around this idea of legal plunder. And legal plunder is this idea of transferring wealth within the country. And so basically taking what if you were to do in the private sector, taking somebody's money or taking somebody else's stuff to give it to the poor, it's legal in the government sense. But the other thing that Francois Bastier brought up was this idea of protectionism. So this idea that they could put up barriers that protect domestic producers by harming consumers and foreign competitors. And so basically protecting a certain group of individuals that were producing. Now, protectionism has gone on to where now we have global protectionism, so
Yeah,
it's not necessarily regional,
sure.
but we have put so many barriers of entry into marketplaces, and this is what's happening in France as well and has been for a long time, that it doesn't become competitive and there's not an equal playing ground for everybody to have an equal battle in the marketplace. And the last thing that Francois Bastier really brings up is this idea of social engineering and the idea that legislators are planning society rather than protecting rights. And so Francois Bastier's book, The Law, is a very interesting historical read that has extreme historical context in post-revolution France. But if you look at what's going on in France right now, they've had like 4 prime ministers in the last 12 months. In the last 12 months, they've had 4 prime ministers. And so they went from uh, Michael Barnier, and then they went to Francois Bayrou, and then Bayrou, his tenure was short lived. He lost a huge confidence vote by a margin of 364 to 194. So um, then they put in Sebastian Lecroux, and his tenure only lasted 27 days before he resigned. And now we have another prime minister, Lecornu.
That dude didn't even make it a month.
The home
He was like, I'm done. I'm done.
He didn't even make it a short month, dude. Short month's
couldn't get past orientation. His,
past.
his name is Lecorn.
The orientation videos about all he watched. He's like, oh, this is the job, huh? I'm done.
You just watch the sexual abuse training, sexual harassment training.
It's the sexual harassment training video.
I would try to learn the pronunciation, but these guys aren't lasting longer than a month, so what's the point?
Yeah,
why,
there's no.
why even learn their name or anything?
No, Korn was a great rock group in the '90s. No, I think what's happening right now in France is that you're witnessing, and to your point, Jason, that the government's getting exposed for being social engineers. The government's getting exposed for trying to take over a people rather than survey people. This is
Overreaching on them.
they're overreaching. This is the show has arrived.
Yeah.
You know, let's get ready to rumble. I mean, this is the roost the
Damn, dude.
proverbial rooster
know
has
what-
come home to roost.
You know what some of this stuff makes me think? Remember that old movie, Soylent Green?
Great
You know what I'm
reference.
talking about
Yeah.
though, it kind of makes me think about some of that stuff where they're like all about the no man, it's cheaper to get modern era style would be like you go to the grocery store and you get like $1 bag of garbage chips, some donuts, some garbage processed stuff, but it's expensive to get anything that comes out of the ground. I mean, like everything grown's expensive and everything like real is like very pricey and ritzy.
Yeah.
So, you know,
It's kind of like that joke that every Frenchman has every other country's flag in their basement just in case. Because
That's messed up, bro.
But I mean, this is France. Like France has been a nightmare for
many
a very
guillotines?
long time.
how many guillotines do they have out? That's how I measure how angry they are. Hey, French people are angry when they get mad at politicians. Like I don't doubt the French. I must say, French people angry at politics and politicians because they're like, oh, cool. Here's a guillotine. Here's some rope. There's some horses. There's a tree there. Like they'll figure out a way and just get rid of crooked politicians and not think twice.
Yeah.
So I got to give them their credit on that because all the French jokes, frogs, wine, perfume, blah blah blah, all that stuff. But really, when they get pissy with bad politicians, they're like, here's a guillotine,
Well,
right? Or hop
this
in.
is a France is a very interesting study on like partial socialism and the stewardship of the government because what happens when the levels of socialism that you have, you can no longer afford, and that's what we're really staring at in France,
Yeah.
right? Like they
It's
have a they
funding
have
their
a
own oppression at this point.
well, they are, but then the problem becomes, okay, what happens when you can no longer sustain the government programs? Well, they continue to increase taxes, and now they have to budget cut, and that's what the austerity movement is. That's what the austerity economic policies are,
Sounds
and that's what
familiar.
we're seeing being rejected at the present moment. And this is what's about to happen in New York City, people. Like this is what's about to happen in all of these cities that are starting to become more socialistic.
God.
What happens when a government that is in debt to, creditors such as China have to start slashing all of their programs? And we already know that places like California are borrowing internationally as well to keep up with their budget
I
deficits.
bet the French are missing like Viking raids and stuff. They're like, you know what? At least I could prepare for that twice a year. They're like, it's a ship and some dudes that are angry with beards. They're gonna burn and raise and murder and pillage and rape, but I can prepare twice a year for that. That'd be more affordable. At least I can get a spear out or make a cubby hole to hide in.
Well, France isn't the only place having an uprising. We're also seeing an uprising in the United Kingdom, over across the pond in England. Those major protests. Reporting live from the BBC. I'm Erin Lujan. That was my very best. Major protests across multiple English cities, including London, Birmingham, and Manchester. Primary grievances center on mass immigration policies and accelerated asylum processing. So in France, everyone's pissed at the economic decisions that the globalist government is making in France. In England, they're upset at the fact that they're being overrun by the Middle East and by North Africa. Public services, including healthcare, education, and housing, reportedly overwhelmed in affected areas. There's sporadic violence been reported between protest groups and counter protesters. Guys, I watched a video on Instagram of a bunch of Englishmen with the old Red Cross English flags holding up wooden crosses saying England is for the English. This would have been unthinkable 5 years ago.
2 years ago.
They,
3 years ago.
probably
yeah.
5 minutes ago, because people were
5 minutes ago.
people were hiding. This is what I'm trying to say.
I'm thinking when you say this. Remember Jeremy Clarkson, Top Gear, the Grand Tour. He's got Clarkson's farm. He's got a farm, and he talks about the government subsidies for the farm, and he has to can only do certain things and stuff. But remember, they were always talking like when he'd say something like, "Oh, he's racist, he's this," and he's like, "I'm English, man." But I wonder what his opinion is on all this right now. I wonder if there's a video or a clip of him talking about any of this stuff right now.
That'd be great.
I mean, he's old as tar right now, but still,
Yeah.
I'd be curious just to see what he says, just to see his outlook, his opinion, his view, his perspective on all this right now.
That would be great. But what I'm curious about is the United Kingdom, the English government, the Ukrainian government,
Other you country.
the English government. What are they going to do? Because they're not coming to the table and discussing substantive policy change. They're just sending more police on the streets. They're
Same government that banned guns and then banned
Well,
knives and then banned.
This is why Conor McGregor was talking about running for Prime Minister of Ireland, right?
At least he'll
and-
fight somebody.
And Conor McGregor was polling really well at some points, and he may still do it. He can't decide whether or not he's ever coming back to the UFC, and if he could ever stay out of prison long enough, that would also help. But McGregor said in a press conference with, I think it was Donald Trump a couple months ago, Ireland is on the cusp of losing its Irishness, and that an illegal immigration racket was running ravage on the country. We've seen these same protests in Ireland not too long ago, but these protests in rural UK are huge right now.
It's
And
another country of people that don't tolerate government overreach and crap. They'll burn you, bomb you. They don't care. They will snuff you out.
Well, what's interesting though is this is truly the people versus the captured globalist government of England, because there's no significant political party offering any opposition to the current immigration framework.
It's- It's the earners versus the takers, man.
This is exactly why this is unique. This is not left versus right. This is not started by an intelligence agency using Twitter. This is an organic expression of the people saying enough is enough. We're done. England needs to be reclaimed for the English. We're not going to continue to allow mass immigration policies to just take over our country. And no, that's not a racist position. I was having this conversation with my wife yesterday because she she's a woman, so she hates Nick Fuentes by default. And I said, okay, what is it that you have a problem with regards to Nick? Well, her issue is, well, he keeps saying America needs to be just for the whites. That's racist. I said, let me back up because my wife was born in Mexico. She's dual citizen, Mexican citizen, U.S. citizen. I said, okay, you're a Mexican. You were
She's
born.
a key-in for Congress.
I was gonna say is what political position
She should run for Congress.
she would win because she has dual citizenship.
No, she has the wrong country for dual citizenship. Mexico doesn't count. You got to have dual citizenship
Mexico's
to
just
Israel.
little America. You're like,
Yeah, no, that doesn't count. It needs to be Israel. I said, what happened
USA.
if you shipped in hundreds of millions of Chinese into Mexico and you slowly started to see the language change to Mandarin or to Chinese, and you slowly started to hear less Spanish, and you slowly started to see less Spanish speakers and Mexican people, and then the culture started to change, and Mexico started to feel like they were literally losing their heritage and their culture. How would you feel about that? Would that be problematic for you? And she said, absolutely. I
Well, the
said,
white people are already doing that. The white people are already going down to Mexico, and they were protesting in Mexico to get the Americans out of Mexico.
Yes,
They're
yes.
like, leave.
Get out of here. We want Mexico for Mexicans. My
In our
sister.
culture and
My sister-in-law, who lives in Culiacan, she's a Mexican, very proud Mexican, excuse me. We're in her house, and she's complaining about how all the Venezuelans are overrunning her country, and they're ungrateful, and they're draining their system, and they need to get out, go back to Venezuela, and she wants better border protection at the southern border. And I laughed, and I said, you sound like a Trump supporter in the U.S., and she almost flipped out. But that's my point. This is not coming from a heart of racism or hating people. The English people have had enough. They want their country back, and they're doing it right now. Tanzania, you want to go there?
Let's go to Tanzania.
The Tanzanian government was overthrown in a military coup just this October 15th, little less than 25 days ago. President Samia Suluhu Hassan was removed. You love these names, don't you? Was removed from power after refusing military demands to address corruption and Chinese economic influence. So, guys, just a little side note: while we're all fighting about the Middle East, China's quietly taking over all of Africa.
that's a lot of resources.
A lot.
Really thinking about it. There's diamonds, gold, there's oil, coal. There's a lot of stuff in Africa. A lot. Silver. Man.
Well, it's also a staging
Cobalt.
ground.
Isn't there a bunch of cobalt
yeah.
and lithium? And
Yes. And those are the magical words because that's going to power Palantir and the future AI surveillance state system that's being constructed before our very eyes. But I digress. The Tanzanian People's Defense Force sees control under General Simba. It's like Lion
I'm
King.
not gonna lie, dude. I didn't even know. I had to think about it. I was like, Tanzania, that's gotta be like Africa somewhere.
Yeah, the general basically hooked up with the people and said, we're going to cite national emergency and the preservation of our sovereignty, and basically took control of the country. They immediately suspended all of Chinese infrastructure projects and resource extraction agreements. They imposed curfews nationwide with military patrols and international condemnation from Western governments, but popular support domestically. Again, that alignment between the globalists and we the people. The new leadership is promising to renegotiate predatory Chinese loans and contracts, alliance forming with other East African nations that are concerned about Chinese debt diplomacy. And Russia and China have condemned the coup, while several African nations remain silent. Internet restrictions have been temporarily imposed, now partially restored with military oversight. So this is very interesting to me because this is an entire blackout in American media. The United States media establishment does not want we the people to know that the people of Tanzania are overthrowing their government. And you know why I think they're not showing us that? Because they don't want us to know that we have the power. If we unite and if we all can get together and agree and say, we're done, we're taking our country back, guess what happens? There's millions of us and there's like 4 of them. Okay?
Well, yeah, it's like 10% of the whole population is the system and the enforcement of the system. But that's the thing. It says we the people, not them the system, first off. Secondly, we actually all agree 100% of the time because we all want it better.
Yeah.
Even with the differences of political views or liking things or whatever, but we all do agree 100% of the time.
Yeah, my blue-haired liberal friend doesn't want to get robbed in the middle of the night and, wants to, like, not have their currency
Car
inflated.
broken into.
Yeah.
They want their money to be able to kept in their pocket. They don't want to be like be able to like go buy a gallon of milk without a problem.
The French and the English are losing their country, so they've gotten to the FAFO part of the
So
movie.
so is it like we're getting back to modern tribalism again?
Yes.
Is that what's going on now instead of the big like UNs and global yada yadas? Everybody's going, nah, dude, you're screwing with my tribe. You're messing with my cave. You're screwing with my food. You're messing with my fire. You're taking my fire.
The real fight has started.
Yeah.
Well, we're at a precipice, and we're at a precipice
Ooh, love
in
that
a
word.
Christian sense, because Nigeria just hit the mainstream media. But what people don't tend to realize is the percentage of Christians right now in Tanzania is somewhere between 57 to 60%. This is a Christian predominantly
I did not know.
like country.
Really?
In some places in Africa, the amount of Christians is
Are they
upwards
getting-
of 90 to
Are they
97%.
getting wiped out, annihilated like the Nigerian
So-
Christians? Or
We don't know for sure, but we do know this. We know that about 800 bodies were secretly dumped by the Tanzanians, and these were protesters that their bodies just were secretly being dumped. They were killing off the protesters and just secretly dumping them. The likelihood that they were Christian is pretty high, right? Because
Yes.
37% of that
yeah.
country is Muslim, is Islam. And so when you look at these African countries that are predominantly Christian, and you look at the governments that are running them, you just look at it and you go, guys, there is more Christians than there are non-Christians in these countries. And are we at the time where Christians are going to start uprising against the government, and have we taken Romans 13 out of context? And I think that's a very important conversation that we have to have in terms of what does Romans 13 say about governments that are uh, tyrannic?
Well, I think Romans 13 is weaponized by our would-be conquerors to keep us in line. The spirit in which Romans 13 was written, and I read a book that I would encourage everybody to read, is written by Pastor Chuck Baldwin, literally self-titled Romans 13. And he makes it a very important distinction. It's written with the assumption and understanding that it's godly government that's pursuing goodness, truth, and righteousness. So when government is established by God for God's glory, and it's in alignment with his word and his law, then yes, Romans 13 is a literal interpretation. However, it's been weaponized against Christians, I believe, to say government can do whatever the hell they want to do, and you have to obey, and you can never challenge that. That is not the spirit of Romans 13. And that is really the short form of that book.
So I just want to know, like, when missionaries went over to these African countries to share the gospel, and obviously they've done a great job in a lot of respects. I mean, Zambia's at 95% Christians, Rwanda's at 93%, the Congo's at 90%, Namibia's at 90%, Zimbabwe's at 87%, Liberia's at 85%, South Africa's at 85%. I mean, there's more Christians in some of these African countries than that. I mean, the United States has nothing on them, right? And so when the gospel got shared in these countries, what did they tell them? Like, hey, just guys, we know you have a whole lot of faith, and we've shared the gospel with you. Just stay out of politics. Like, if that's the message, if we are seeing, and this has not been a conversation.
Oh, that's a good point.
Like, this has not been a conversation.
it's like
but
saying eat the Cracker Jacks, but you don't touch the prize at the bottom.
yes, this idea that's been
That's
spread
funny.
that Christians should have nothing to do with government and just lay down and take it. Like, I don't see that as biblical. But is that what was being preached in these African countries, that we have populations of 85, 90, 95% Christians that are in these oppressive countries? I mean, South Africa's at 85%, is a first world country in many respects. Why do we see the South African government being able to do what they're doing to these people?
Yeah, it reminds me of Roman Emperor Constantine, right? I mean, he was an inevitable consequence of the gospel being spread. I mean, the Roman Empire ended up swelling to a point where the majority were Christian, and it became a political decision And again, I don't know Constantine's calculus in that decision, whether it was Holy Spirit filled because he wanted to further the gospel, or whether it was a political calculation that he made. But the reality is that the Roman Emperor Constantine had to legalize Christianity because the church forced the hand. And I think what Jason's saying right now is that now that we've reached critical mass population levels of Christians in these countries, it's gonna force the hand of government to reflect the people, or we're gonna have a problem, right?
Well, and the last thing, and because we're on the air, we got to cover up this show here, but the last thing is this: how have all of these Christians across the globe, where in the Bible is it taught that they are to rely on the government for provisions? Because they've all failed to understand that it's the church's job to provide for the poor, the elderly, and those that cannot work, not those that choose not to work, those that can't work, right? And the widows. And instead, they've turned to the government for their provisions and for their protections. And that is not biblical, but that is what we're seeing in all of these countries that have majority Christian populations
Is that
and socialistic governments.
is that kind of like here, where like they kind of leverage that tax exemption for churches and stuff here against them to kind of keep them
Yeah, the
off to the
501c3.
side, to like, if you want to
But
keep
but
your
the church by and large in the United States said, you know what, we understand that we have this role to take care of people, but you know what, the government's offering to do it, so we're just going to let them. But this has been Faith, Family, Fitness, Freedom. Join us every Saturday and online, YouTube and Rumble. God bless.
Peace.
you want to better be better.